This story is about someone who, tired of being falsely accused by their mother-in-law, decides to reveal recorded phone conversations at a family gathering, causing quite a stir. What happened? Let's find out. Before we start the story, please like and subscribe. It really helps the channel.
Hello. I'm a woman in my early 30s who got married relatively young. My parents divorced when I was young, so I grew up living with my dad. He was really good to me, but inevitably, I felt the absence of my mother. I always envied the close-knit, warm family dynamic that others had. That's why I decided to marry my college boyfriend. He was the first person I ever dated. But he was always polite and kind to everyone. He always put my words and wishes first. People around us would often say I did well in finding such a boyfriend. I was the one who proposed. It was exactly 3 years after we started dating. I wanted to start a family as soon as possible. And perhaps there was also a fear of losing my boyfriend. So, when we had just started our jobs, I began urging him to marry me. He was a bit surprised at first, but he soon agreed. Both of our families were opposed when we told them, but we pushed through. And so, we became a married couple right as we entered society. Despite going against our parents' wishes to marry, neither family contributed financially to our union. Honestly, it didn't bother me. Being with my partner was all that mattered, even if it meant living in a tiny room. Looking back, I realize I might have been seeking to fill a void of affection. Yet, marriage life hasn't been bad. Both my husband and I focused on working hard and saving money. Living together, our expenses decreased significantly compared to when we were dating. Cooking meals together, taking walks near our home, and watching movies on P served as our dates. Now, we partially own a house, though the bank holds a significant share. We're considering having children slowly or possibly just living the two of us. A decision we're still contemplating. Our communication is strong, and I have no regrets about our marriage. However, there is one issue: my in-laws, or more precisely, my mother-in-law. She sometimes accuses me of trivial and absurd things. Early in our marriage, my husband and I packed a picnic and went to a nearby park for the day. I took a photo of us eating on a blanket and reading, which I then set as my profile picture. My mother-in-law saw it and said to me, "Next weekend, you should take us with you. Eating outside from a picnic basket looks so fun." At that time, I had no ill feelings towards my in-laws. So I replied, "Sure, I'll come over this weekend, and we can all go together." I even informed my husband in advance. We prepared a generous picnic and headed to my in-laws' house before the weekend outing. Upon arrival, we found both of my in-laws had just had a big lunch and were taking a nap. My husband, surprised, woke them up saying, "Mom, Dad, didn't we agree to go on a picnic today? How can we go if you're still sleeping?" My father-in-law groggily responded, "Picnic? What picnic?" While my mother-in-law frowned. So, I gently reminded her, "Mother, you mentioned over the phone this week that we should go out together this weekend. Did you forget?" I wasn't being sharp, I just said it, with a smile, trying to be considerate in case she was embarrassed about forgetting. So my mother-in-law suddenly raised her voice and said, "When did I ever say that? I just said it's nice to see you two getting along well, and that I was envious. When did I make such a promise?" It was like she was scolding us without really scolding us. At that moment, I thought, maybe there had been a misunderstanding in our communication. Since we had already packed the picnic, we ended up just laying it out and eating at my in-laws' place. Watching my mother-in-law happily saying, "It's nice not having to cook dinner," made me a bit suspicious. But what could I do? I couldn't just assume she was intentionally trying to give me a hard time. So I had to let it go. However, it made me wonder if my initial response was wrong, as she occasionally played these kinds of tricks on me. She would cunningly say things differently to my father-in-law or my husband, making me out to be the odd one. And then, she would embarrass me by saying, "Why does this young one keep forgetting things? She seems more absent-minded than me, and I'm over 50. It was all in such a way that directly confronting her with, "Didn't you say this? I heard you clearly," felt awkward and difficult, so I just held it in. Then, one day during the Chuseok holiday, when I was off work, and my husband had a duty day before the holiday, she asked me to buy something. Knowing that my husband was working, she called and said, "Go to the area and buy some fruit. The relatives are coming, and I need to give them some. But delivery isn't an option right now." Since my mother-in-law had asked me to go, what choice did I have? She had already called the fruit farm and told them, "My daughter-in-law will come today. Please prepare 10 boxes. So, with a sigh about how my precious holiday was being spent, I headed to the designated area. It was about a 4-hour-round trip from our place, and the holiday traffic was horrendous. While I was carefully making my way there was an accident on the highway. The traffic was stop and go, and during one of those stops, the car behind me crashed into mine. I quickly called the insurance company and also let my husband know. He rushed over, worrying about me first and foremost. Fortunately, I wasn't hurt badly enough to require hospitalization, so after leaving the car at the service center, we went home in my husband's car. Once I got home and sat down on the sofa, that's when the tension finally lifted. As I was calming down from the shock, my husband asked, "But where were you going?" "All the way to that far place." Hearing that, I suddenly remembered and called my mother-in-law. When she answered, she asked, "So, did you buy them well, and are on your way back?" I had to explain that I couldn't make the purchase, because I got into an accident on the way there. "I'm sorry, Mother. I couldn't get the fruits because there was an accident on the way. The car is at the service center now," I told her. Upon hearing this, my mother-in-law clicked her tongue in disapproval and scolded me, saying, "Can't you do anything right?" before hanging up. I didn't even get a word of concern from her. And feeling so overwhelmed with sadness, I burst into tears. I sobbed as I explained everything to my husband, who had asked what had happened. My husband was furious after hearing my story. He immediately confronted his mother, saying, "Mom, how can you not worry? She went all that way because you asked, and then got into an accident." My mother-in-law, with wide eyes, retorted, "Did I tell her to go?" She said she wanted to treat the relatives and insisted on going despite the holiday traffic. "Why are you blaming me?" My husband was at a loss for words, not knowing whose story was correct. I too was dumbfounded, and without any evidence, we just had to let it go. And during that time, I ended up preparing all the holiday meals myself. My mother-in-law had only prepared the ingredients. She had insisted I go, and then I ended up in an accident at that moment. I seriously wondered if she might be a psychopath. Throughout our marriage, there have been countless incidents like this. But a few months ago, something happened. My sister-in-law got married around the end of last year and was having a housewarming party. We were invited, and my mother-in-law subtly asked me to help prepare the food for my sister-in-law's event. When my in-laws visit, it's somewhat acceptable to serve delivery food or the like for my sister-in-law since it's her parental home. However, it's a different story when it comes to her husband's family. It seems my sister-in-law wanted to make a good impression on her in-laws for the first time. She was preparing food after getting married. She felt awkward asking me directly, so she sought help from my mother-in-law. Since I grew up cooking with my dad, I'm actually quite skilled in the kitchen, more so than my mother-in-law. So I happily agreed to help. My mother-in-law said she would prepare all the ingredients. So I gave her a list of what was needed and went to my sister-in-law's house on the day of the housewarming to help out from the morning. Though it was more like I ended up doing almost everything since my sister-in-law can't cook at all. But since she's always been really good to me and has never made me feel left out, I was glad to do it. But after I returned home from cooking, I heard that the family on my brother-in-law's side had gotten sick from the food. My sister-in-law came crying to our in-laws' house, and my husband and I were shocked by the news and rushed over. As soon as my husband and I stepped into the in-laws' house, a box of tissues flew towards me. Luckily, my husband blocked it, but my mother-in-law was glaring at me, fuming. I was so shocked that my hands started to shake. Still, I managed to steady my voice and asked my mother-in-law, "Mother, what's wrong?" She slapped her palms together and said to me, "Is that really what you have to say right now? Everyone got sick from the food you made. You really have some nerve." So in front of my mother-in-law, father-in-law, sister-in-law, and brother-in-law, I shared what I had been thinking. "Mom, you brought oysters from your friend's store that day. They didn't seem fresh, and I hesitated about serving them. But you insisted on including them. I think that was the problem." Then my mother-in-law shouted, "Are you blaming me now? You offered to help with the cooking, and now you're pinning this on someone else." Feeling unjustly accused, I tearfully responded, "You asked me to help with the housewarming. When did I ever say I'd help on my own initiative?" To which my mother-in-law retorted, "Really, this is laughable. All you had to do was apologize, and now you're trying to shift the blame to me? Don't come back here again." Hearing that, I felt my blood boiling. So, I played a recording of a phone call with my mother-in-law in front of the family. It had her convincing me to help with my sister-in-law's housewarming food, saying she would buy all the ingredients. Hearing this, my father-in-law, husband, and even my sister-in-law started to reprimand my mother-in-law. My father-in-law angrily said, "After all the trouble our daughter-in-law went through to prepare food for the housewarming, you scold her? Apologize right now." With the situation turned, my mother-in-law finally stepped back and said, "I'm sorry. I misunderstood." Honestly, the apology didn't feel genuine, and the hurt from the whole ordeal didn't easily subside. So I left the in-laws' house without a word and went home. This happened at the beginning of the year, and my mother-in-law has been apologizing since. However, I'm still upset, So this Lunar New Year, my husband and I agreed to only visit my parents. It's not like we can avoid seeing each other forever, so I'm wondering when I should accept her apology. But I'm finding it hard to let go of my anger.
Some people only offer a simple apology when they're cornered after trying to dodge responsibility. They seem to think that's enough of an apology. Perhaps they believe, for someone as noble as me, this is already a big concession. Such people don't realize why they end up living lonely lives. For my own sake, I have no choice but to distance myself from people like that. You did the right thing.